Mary, just pop it in the chat below, and any questions, I'll feed them back to Mary at the end. So I'd love to introduce you now to our next speaker, Mary Jensen. She is a human behaviour specialist, a mindset master, and a professional public speaker. She's actually an incredible woman, and I'm really looking forward to her presentation today. And I also have to say I love her topic of what her presentation is called, which is What Switched the Bitch? How our thinking creates the world. So I'd love to hand it over to you. Welcome, Mary.
Hi, Tanya. Thank you so much for having me here today. Let me share my screen and be able to enlighten you all on what did switch that bitch. Life is a really incredible thing. We have experiences in our life that we create meanings about, and that impacts how we live. And to tell you what switched the bitch, I have to go back to tell you what started the bitch. So when we're born, we're all born with the same possibilities, the same abilities. So if we look at the works of Dr. John Demartini, he's one of the human behaviour specialists, very worldwide renowned. He talks about every human being has 4,726 odd traits or aspects or abilities. And that when we're born, we're actually all born with all of those traits intact. It's then what starts to happen to us that starts to impact on the ones that we bring to the table, the ones that we suppress, some we forget we even have, and that's a huge story. So I'll begin right sort of back at the beginning. I'm one of 8 kids, so I've got 4 older brothers and 3 younger sisters, and we come from nothing. We had no money. Every piece of clothing that you see here in the picture is secondhand. And I know that you can't see our underwear, but our underwear is too. And I'm the first girl after 5 boys. I had to wear runners after 4 boys had worn runners. Have you ever put your foot into an old runner and it's got an old moulding in the foot? Well, I had 4 lots of old mouldings in the foot before my foot went into there. And the picture with my sisters down below, that's us dressed up for Pixie photos. My mum and dad won some Pixie photos at a shopping centre, and they dressed us up in our Sunday best dress and took us down to have our portraits done. So you can see that we're probably not in our Sunday best dress like most people would think of Sunday best dress. So if we change our thinking, we can change our life. And a lot of people buy into or practice positive psychology. And positive psychology teaches us that a negative thought weighs 2 positive thoughts, and that if we want to change our thinking, we have to create positive thoughts. But it's not quite as simple as that. So when I was changing my thinking, I grew up thinking very, very negatively. I did some study and I wrote a module for the Coaching Institute on positive psychology, and I found out that a negative thought weighs 2 positive thoughts. To bring us back to the positive, we have to have 3 thoughts. When I started to do the practice myself, I'm an overachiever. Who else is an overachiever? I didn't think 3 would be enough for me. So I lined up 5. I lined up the birth of my 3 kids, the day I got engaged and the day I got married. So anytime I felt myself going to a negative thought, I would bring in my 5 positive thoughts. But what we need to do is actually go back even deeper than that and unpack the things that created our thinking in the first place. If I go all the way back to when I was 3 years old, when I was 3 years old, my next sister was born, and she was on her way, and my mum gets raced off to the hospital to have the delivery, and everybody's really excited, and I get shipped off to this other family. My brothers all got to stay home with my dad, and I got shipped off to be taken care of somewhere else, and I didn't want to be shipped off or taken care of anywhere else. I wanted to stay with my family. So one of the things that I made that story mean, and we talk about defining events in our life, and if you've got a strong memory from something back in your life, they're usually what's attached to our defining events. our defining moments. And I made this a defining moment because I made it mean that girls were weak and that girls got sent away from the family and the girls had to be taken care of. And I didn't want to be that. I wanted to be like my 4 older brothers. I was with them. Like, there was nothing else. I only knew about hanging out with them. So I wanted to be with them. I didn't want to be this girl thing. What the hell was this girl thing? I didn't even know what a girl was. All I wanted to do was hang out with the crowd, and the crowd was all boys. So I totally, at that moment in my life, disowned my feminine side, disowned my feminine energy. And then, like we all do, we trottle off to primary school. So here I am at primary school, and I had a really poor experience in grade prep at primary school. I was on the oval, and the group of, who knows the cool kids at school? There's always a group of cool kids and a group of not cool kids. I was never in the cool kids. But the cool kids came and they circled me on the oval, and they sent one girl in to get me. Now, she came in to get me. I don't know what was going to happen to me. I was in fear. So what did I do to protect myself? I bit her. So what happens if you bite somebody at school? Off you go to the principal's office. So I was taken up to the principal's office, and I was at a Catholic school, and a nun was the principal, and that nun, she bit me. Isn't it amazing how people do things to you when they're trying to teach you what not to do? It's crazy. You know, why would, if I'm not supposed to bite, why would somebody else bite me? So biting was my way of protecting myself at the time. As I said, 4 older brothers, rough and tumble world. You know, I had to find something to protect myself. So at the same time, I was biting my brothers for protection. And my dad did exactly the same thing as the principal. He bit me. He actually bit me even harder and ground his teeth on my arm. And that didn't teach me at all not to bite. It actually taught me how to bite even harder. My brothers were so angry that he taught me how to bite even harder. And so what did I make that mean in my life? I made that mean that people in authority weren't going to take care of me and that I had to be strong enough to do it myself. And it also gave me a huge undercurrent and unconscious bias to protect the underdog. So I started living life firstly having to protect me because nobody else was going to take care of me, and also having to protect the underdog. School wasn't a really nice place for me at all. You can see this is into high school. If you have a look at the sandals, you can see that everybody else's sandals look shiny and new, and my sandals are old because, as I've talked about before, all the clothing that you can see me wearing there is all secondhand. Up until this point, I had never, ever had anything brand new of my own to wear. School was a really tough place for me, and so coming through after 4 older brothers was really, really difficult. Every time I'll go back a little bit, every time I did anything at school or went into a new year or anything like that, everybody would say, all the teachers, are you a Wilson? Are you another Wilson? Are you another Wilson? And I'd have to say yes. So I stepped into the senior school. So I'm going into year 11 and year 12. And only 2 of us had made it that far. My other brothers had left school at that point. So the principal, as he's calling out the roll, he calls out Mary Wilson. And he says, Mary Wilson, are you Anthony Wilson's little sister? And it was the first time in my life that I wanted to say no. I didn't want to be labelled as the rest. I didn't want to walk into the senior school with that baggage. And I knew that if I didn't say who I was and I got found out, it would make it even worse. So I'm doing this mental story in my head, and he says, Mary Wilson, do you know who you are? Are you Anthony Wilson's little sister? So I look up at him and I say, yes, I am. And he says, here comes trouble. 2 months later, he actually suspends me for wagging one class. And when he did give me that suspension, he said, I knew you were going to be trouble. So we start to be labelled and we start to live into our labels. I don't know that wagging one class needed that sort of punishment, but that's what I was delivered. And through that experience, I decided that I wasn't going back. I wasn't going back to school. So at 15 years old, I left school, and I actually then moved out of home. It created a lot of tension at home, that experience and being suspended from school. And even though my brothers were really wild and in a lot of trouble, not one of them had ever been suspended before. So every day, my family were down on me about this suspension and about the disgrace that I'd brought to the family. My dad was a really violent alcoholic. So to be in trouble, he felt, was a slur against him. So I decided then that I was going to move out of home. So I was 15 and I would say to my dad, when I'm 16, I'm gone. When I'm 16, I'm gone. When I'm 16, I'm gone. And he knew I was, because I'd already started work part-time at McDonald's at this stage. And he said, if you're going at 16, pack your things and get now. So I did. I moved out of home at 15. The next job that I got was at a company called EDS, Electronic Data Systems. It was a really incredible place to work. I started there when I was 17, and I then I'd moved from a few houses to a few houses at this stage, and then moved in with a girl and shared a flat with a girl from work. But what happened, and what is my big defining moment at Electronic Data Systems, is I was called into the office with our senior manager. I was working as an accounting junior. I was doing accounts payable and accounts receivable. And she sat me down and she said, we're a really progressive company. Look at the old computer in the picture. Doesn't it make you laugh? She said, we're a really progressive company and we like to train our staff up to be whatever they want. And she said, right now, you have the opportunity to go anywhere you want. She said, you can go into IT, you can go to stay in accounting, you can move anywhere, decide what you want to do and start planning the future that you want. And I'd never, ever thought of a future at that stage. I'd thought of survival. Up until that stage, my main thing was survival. I hadn't thought of the future. And she really impressed me that day. So, of course, I thought, I want to be like her. So I said, well, I would probably like to study accounting. You know, I'm in the accounts department. So I started to study an associate diploma in accounting. And I worked really, really hard. I was hourly paid worker at this time. So, of course, if I did overtime, if I worked longer hours, I got more pay. And because I was paying rent and bills and food and living out of home, I needed more money. So I worked really, really hard to be able to get as much money as I can. So I was working long hours, studying part-time, didn't really have much activities outside of that. So I spent most of my time studying and working. And I met a boy, and sometimes those boy moments don't turn out how they are meant to be. Have you ever been so sad in your life that it physically hurts inside? That's where I ended up. So I was working really hard. I was studying really hard, and I met this boy, and we started dating, and we actually dated for 5 years. The first 3 years were amazing. He made me really happy. We did lots of things. You know, I think I went on an aeroplane for the first time in my life while we were together. And then at the 3-year mark, he proposed to me. And I thought all my dreams had come true. Everything that I was planning, that life, meaning and purpose, everything that I was planning, I could get married, I could have children, sail off into the sunset and create the most incredible life. But we happened to get onto this emotional roller coaster. I had my appendix removed. It was an emergency at work. I got rushed off. And we'd had a bit of an argument the weekend before with his mum. And when I got rushed off to the emergency with my appendix, my work rang his home to try to contact him. He was on my contact in the HR department. And his mum thought it was a hoax because we'd had the argument on the weekend. She thought it was a hoax and that I wasn't really having my appendix out. So firstly, she didn't contact him at all. And secondly, what she did was she changed their phone. That day, she had their phone changed. So here I am dating a guy that he's proposed to me. We've laid by the engagement ring, and his mum's changed the phone number. I can't even ring him anymore. And then he realised that his mum didn't want him to marry me. So for the next 2 years, we were on this emotional roller coaster. Every weekend, he would say to me, we'll get married, we'll get engaged on the weekend. He'd book the restaurant, and whenever he phoned me up on that Saturday morning, I would hear in his voice that he was gutting out of it. And the last time that happened was my 21st birthday. And he said to me, I promise you, I will never ruin your 21st birthday. How could I possibly do that? And he did. So what did I do after that? I broke up with him and I went on a complete bender. I started getting into drugs, partying. I really lived life on the edge because I really didn't care if I was here or not. And that actually did lead into a suicide attempt. I took a whole lot of tablets and I tried to end my life. And I was saved. Somebody found me and they took me off by ambulance. And I had my stomach pumped. But I wasn't one of those people who woke up the next day saying, hallelujah, hallelujah, my life, I'm so grateful that I survived. No, I really hit rock bottom. I went on 12 months of this incredible destruction of a bender. Yes, I worked. I was still working in accounting, but I was working in accounting taking drugs. I was taking drugs. Those drugs let me work long hours. There is quite a bit of drugs in the corporate environment, and a lot of people sweep it under the carpet, but many people are being forced to work really, really long hours, and sometimes they choose that way to take themselves to be able to survive and stay awake to work those really long hours. I've got to be so grateful at the end of that year, of that destructive year, I met Derek, who I'm now married to. This month actually, we'll be celebrating 28 years of marriage. And I'm really grateful that he found me. I'm really grateful that he stood by me. One of the stories that I love to talk about is we made an agreement in that first year that I would give up drugs and he would give up smoking. Let me tell you, neither of us gave up. We were running around behind each other's backs, sneaking. But in our second year, we did actually both honour the agreement that we made with each other and start to walk a healthier lifestyle. Unfortunately, my dad passed away when I was 22, and I was working really hard. I was still taking drugs at this stage, and I just did not know what to do about life. I felt like people were just abandoning me. And my mum, having 8 children, she sort of carried her insides around on her outsides. They tried to put her on Newstart, which is the equivalent of Centrelink today, and to get a job. And we had to work really hard. She ended up being put on a disability pension. But I had to take over from that point, being the head of the family. My brothers were into drugs and alcohol, and I can't talk. I was going down the same road. And somebody had to take care of my mum and my little sisters. So all of that fell onto me. So it was the next layer of me learning to shut down my emotions. And I think I've created this thing that I like to call Pandora's box, where you have an emotion and it really, really hurts inside. So you put it in the box and you shut the lid. And then your dad dies and you have all these emotions and you've got to do so much, organise a funeral, organise everybody else. So you grab those emotions and you put them in a box and you shut the lid, Pandora's box. And I got really, really good at grabbing all those bad emotions and not dealing with them and shutting them down in Pandora's box and shutting the lid. Then I started to work at a company called EES Shipping. My habit of working long hours to get that extra overtime pay was not as effective anymore because I was moving into salary. I started at EES Shipping as an assistant accountant, and over the 5 years that I worked there, I progressed very, very quickly from assistant accountant to accounts manager, and then I secured the role of financial controller, the highest role that you can have in finance in Australia. Sometimes they call it financial controller and sometimes they call it CFO. And Derek and I got married. I think it's the next one. Yes, Derek and I got married while I was working at EES Shipping. And the first year of our married life was difficult to say the least. I think that the first year of marriage for everybody is difficult. For us, it was even more so because I was travelling back and forth to New Zealand. I took a computer system from Australia and implemented it in New Zealand from a sales perspective, from an accounting perspective. from an operations perspective. So it was a huge role. And so I was back and forth, long hours. I remember watching that Whitbread race, which is a boat race that goes all the way around the world. It came into the Auckland Harbour while I was at work at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I rang home, 4 o'clock in the morning. I rang home and I woke Derek up. It was 1 a.m. here. And I said, oh my God, you should see what I can see. This incredible view. And he was not impressed. He wanted to go back to sleep. But Derek and I created an incredible relationship. Sometimes I wonder how he put up with me. But in that time, we had 3 beautiful, beautiful children. I was one of those crazy people. I think I've always been busy and done things hard because we had 3 under 3. And I didn't take very long off work at all. So when Claire was 2 years old, so they were 2, 3 and 4 at this stage, I secured my next huge role at Gainsborough Hardware. Gainsborough Hardware was an incredible place for me to work. I started there and progressed again up the ranks because I worked like a psycho, crazy, work. And we all grew up there. My kids grew up there. I was there for 10 years. Long hours, hugely long hours. And this is where I started into the work of mergers and acquisitions. The owner of Gainsborough Hardware was a company called GWA. GWA owned a number of group of companies. So they owned Caroma, Dux, Bribus, a lot of household brands that you've heard about. Gainsborough actually made the door furniture. So every time there was a merger or acquisition, I was pulled out of the business up into the merger and acquisition team. And we worked on, I think, about 7 different mergers and acquisitions while I was there. Some of them were successful, some of them weren't successful. I'd be sent away on a merger. If I talk about the Glider garage door merger, I was sent away to Adelaide for 6 months and, you know, sign all these confidentiality agreements and you're not allowed to talk about it. I wasn't even allowed to tell Derek what we were working on. So, of course, my children decided that I was a spy. You know, they're not allowed to say where mummy is. She's away at work. But what? Of course, when you're a child, what else would you make that mean? Of course, I was a spy. And when I came back and we bought a garage door company, they were so disappointed that I was just a regular accounting person. I worked like a dog at Gainsborough Hardware, and my children did jazz, tap, hip hop, singing, and basketball. I worked somewhere between 60 and 80 hours most weeks, and sometimes even longer. And then I ran my kids to all these activities. I now refer to that time as I was a human doing, not a human being. I didn't want my kids to grow up with the life that I had. They never wore secondhand clothes. They never wore secondhand shoes. They had brand new everything. And I worked really, really hard to make sure that they would never experience a poor life like I did. But while I was doing that, I was actually losing the experience of life. While I was at all their activities, my mind was always back on the task at work or the next merger or the next big deal or the next big thing. So I did what most people do in corporate. I coffeed up in the morning and I wined down at night. Who coffees up in the morning? Who winds down at night? My winding down to wind down at night was becoming a challenge. In fact, my kids were in high school by this stage and they were doing science and they were learning about measurements in science. So every time I had a glass of wine, they would be saying, Mum, that's more than 1 standard drink. Mum, that's 2 standard drinks. And it got so bad that I actually bought Banrock Station casks so that I could mix my wine so that I wouldn't have 1 or 2 bottles of empty wine sitting on the bench every night so that nobody in the house could keep tabs on how much I was drinking. Now, my kids are all asthmatic and my husband's an asthmatic too. So I would never drink if Derek was away. And Derek works for Harry the Hirer. He's been there 25 years now. And he had to travel with work often. He would do the boat show, Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney every year. And this particular year, he was away for the boat show for 8 days. And he came back and the kids had a show on at the school. And we went up to the school and one of the teachers wasn't taking care of Stephanie, like I believe. There was a lot of bullying going on. And as I said, I have this undercurrent to take care of the underdog. So I went up to the show at the school and I had a go at this teacher. So the teacher and I got actually into a big fight. And when we came home that night, I came in and I slammed the door and I started stomping up the stairs, and the kids were calling at me, and Derek screamed out, "Leave your mum alone. She hasn't had alcohol for 8 days." And I remember that moment so vividly. This is one of those defining moments that I was talking about, because I was halfway up the stairs and I remember being halfway to take the next step and I froze, and I had the thought, oh my God, I'm turning into my dad. And so that was a big day for me. I decided it was time to make some changes. It was a really difficult time. I blamed Derek on a lot of things. When we're unhappy inside of ourselves, we blame the people that are closest to us. So I remember driving to work one of those days at that time. We'd been married about 10 years at this stage. And I rang him on the way to work and I said, I can't do another day of this. I can't live another day. My life is horrendous. It's swallowing me up and I just can't be with you anymore. And I hung up the phone that day and I remember streaming tears down my face in the car, driving to work still, because of course that's what you do. You can still go to work. That's all you do. And I remember saying to myself, please, God, let me love him just how he is. I don't know what I did that day, but when I got to work, I Googled something and I went along to my first energy healing session. I'd never had anything to do with energy healing up until this point of my life. And I thought, this is something that I need. This might help me de-stress. So I got really into it as a hobby. I started colour therapy that you can see in the picture here. I started crystal therapy. I learned Reiki. I got into essential oils. I was searching for something to help me change who I was. My family was incredible. You know, that time at Gainsborough Hardware, we grew up and we, you know, grew old probably, really, if I think about it. And I had everything. So anybody from the outside looking in had a great house. We had a boat, you know, beautiful family, kids, loving husband. To everybody from the outside world, I was ticking all those boxes. But I wasn't ticking any boxes for me. I was angry. I was alone. I yelled so much at this period of time in my life that our cockatiel yelled, Adrian, quick. Every time I felt like I ticked something off that to-do list, 3 or 4 more things added on to the to-do list. Who's ever experienced when they tick off something in the to-do list that, you know, 2 or 3 more things are added to the bottom? And I was ticking that to-do list of life so much that this is a picture of my family in Cairns. We went to Cairns and we were doing all the local attractions. I'd now moved on to Robert Bosch at this stage, and I was meant to have holidays. We were meant to go on a family holiday for 8 days, and they cut my holidays in half. I was only allowed to have 4. So I had to cram 8 days of busyness into 4 days. And we did a family holiday every year. And I was psycho at the family holidays as I was at work. I would book this, and this, and we would just run from thing to thing to cram in as much as we could to get it all done while we were there. This is us on a nature walk up to a big waterfall and scenery, one of the big tourist attractions in Cairns. Because what was I doing? I was ticking the box. But you want to know what's really important thing to learn about the people that you surround yourself with? If you're ticking a box to tick off the things that we're going to achieve in life, you might want to check with your family what they want to do, because we're at the top of here and my family refused to smile for my picture. And I didn't care. I forced them. I forced them to take the photo, to tick the box, to be at that. My poor youngest daughter, Claire, there, you can see, you might be able to see, she actually is wearing a back brace. She had scoliosis. She's wearing a back brace. That back brace was fiberglass, and under the fiberglass was like a wool. So that back brace was stinking hot, even in winter in Melbourne. And here we are, you know, it's 100 degrees type thing in Cairns. And I forced her to walk and forced all of us to walk on this nature walk. So, yes, I think that one of the things that I did learn along the way is that if you want to make your family happy, maybe ask them what they want to do instead of just focusing on ticking all the boxes. So I had become one of those ball-breaking bitches at the top of finance. Has anybody here seen The Devil Wears Prada? And if you haven't seen the movie The Devil Wears Prada, I'm pretty sure that in your career some stage you might have come across somebody who was one of those ball-breaking bitches. And that was me. I was headhunted by this stage. So I first got headhunted into Robert Bosch. Well, the experience at Robert Bosch was I worked 24/7. I was answerable to America for fixed assets. I had a department in India. I had a department in the Philippines. I ran the finance in Australia. I reported to Asia Pacific because, of course, Australia fits into Asia Pacific. I reported to Germany itself, head office in Germany, and I was meant to be on meetings in all these time zones. And I was at work 24/7. It was the most ridiculous role that I ever took on in my life. And one of the biggest moments that changed me in Bosch was my daughter rang and she said, "Mum, I haven't seen you for 4 months. We haven't had any mother and daughter time, and I need a Deb dress, and Dad is not taking me to buy a Deb dress. If Dad had taken her to buy a Deb dress, she might have got a couple of $100 Deb dress. If Mum took her to buy a Deb dress, she could have a couple of $1,000 Deb dress. Why is that? Because Mum used to pay money because I wasn't spending the time. And if I had my time again, I would not spend the money. I would take the time." PPG Industries, which used to own Dulux and still owns Bristol and a lot of other companies, were right over the fence, like side by side to Bosch. And PPG Industries called me up and they headhunted me. So Bosch was incredible long hours and very, very tired. I was definitely in it, becoming stressed, emotionally, mentally, physically in burnout. So I'm like, yep, I'm out of here. So I jumped the fence to PPG Industries. And who here has ever jumped out of the frying pan into the fire? That's exactly what I did. I jumped straight out of the frying pan, straight into the fire, into a big organisation, still a big global organisation. And that was just ridiculous. The hours there, exactly the same. Too many hours, weekends, no rest. And there was a lot of cultural challenges in that business. And I just thought, oh, I don't know why I moved from Bosch. Bosch seemed like a dream compared to what I walked into at PPG Industries. So when Kina Metal headhunted me, and these places were all headhunting me now because they knew I met all of my KPIs. So if there was any merger or acquisition that needed to make money and that had monetary KPIs built into it, I could do it. Staffing KPIs, I could do it. Month-end KPIs, I was known to never miss a deadline and make more money than was ever budgeted for. So Kina Metal heard about that about me, and they headhunted me there. And I just was never finding my feet again. After that 10 years at Gainsborough Hardware and the merger and acquisition work, I just never found a place to belong. And I was exhausted, absolutely exhausted. But in this time, they asked me to start melding teams together. And as a ball-breaking bitch, I absolutely had the skills required to push people away, to be able to have the staff that we didn't want to keep in the company's buyout. But I didn't have any skills at all to keep the key employees that we needed to. So to encourage buy-in, to nurture the key staff that we needed to keep. So I started to retrain in human behaviour to better do my role in finance. I didn't think that I was going anywhere with this other than reskilling to be able to better do my role in finance and maybe find my feet again. Starting to retrain in human behaviour, about 18 months into that journey, I realised that I was on a personal transformation journey. I was starting to learn about things like laughter and fun and what do you like. And, you know, when I was asked these questions, I remember talking to one of my coaches right back at the beginning. He said to me, you know, what makes you happy? What do you do for fun? And I'm like, I don't know how to be happy. I don't know how to have fun. I was so busy ticking all these boxes that I had not been living in the experiences. So I retrained in human behaviour, and I've had the incredible opportunity to be up with Tony Robbins, who's one of the #1 life coach gurus of the world, to be working with Dr. John Demartini, who's a human behaviour specialist. Tony Robbins is all into the big rah-rah about changing your state, and John Demartini is into all the educational side. So I was, discovering and learning all ends of the spectrum that I could. I had the opportunity to be up on stage with Mel B at an incredible conference, delivering trainings to different organisations. I had the opportunity to do a keynote speech with my daughter for a Mother's Day event where I spoke about my experience through life, and my daughter got to speak about her experience. And one of the things that she said was, "Mum, if you had your time again, wouldn't you spend some more time with us?" Interviewed by Sharon Pearson, who runs the Coaching Institute, the #1 coaching school in Asia Pacific. So some great opportunities. I totally retrained, changed everything. And one of the first things and the biggest tool that I want to give you today that you can take away with you is to be grateful. And when I first learned about a gratitude practice, and we all know that a lot of successful people in the world leave clues. And if we want to do something, or we want to have the success that somebody else has had, we need to follow what they've been doing. So an attitude of gratitude comes from Tony Robbins and Oprah Winfrey and Ellen DeGeneres and trying to think who else is there, Richard Branson and Steve Jobs. All these incredibly wealthy people, they all start their day with a gratitude practice. And I remember starting my day with the gratitude practice was hilarious, because the first 18 months it went like this. I'm grateful for Stephanie, I'm grateful for Adrian, I'm grateful for Claire, I'm grateful for Derek, and I'll be very grateful when this gratitude practice starts to work. I was still doing chores. I was still adding things to that huge to-do list. That was not being grateful at all. My gratitude practice today is so different. I outstretch my arms in my bed. Oh, look, my arms disappears. I outstretch my arm in my bed and I lie there and I go, I love my bed. I love my bed. Who loves their bed? I absolutely love my bed. It takes care of me. It supports me. It keeps me warm. It's always there for me. And then I have a big stretch and I wiggle my fingers and I wiggle my toes. And I'm grateful that I can feel my body. I'm grateful I can wiggle my fingers and my toes. And then I let my mind just go anywhere it likes to go. It might go to colours of greens or rainbows or fresh waters or walking on the beach. I just let it go wherever it wants, and it finds all of these dicky little things to be grateful for. I very rarely now have a person in my gratitude practice, because I'm grateful for all the little things that when the shit hits the fan, and sometimes that's people, I have all these little things to be grateful for. So if you haven't started doing a gratitude practice in the morning, it's a great thing to start. Some of my clients don't get it the same way I do. One of my clients plays with his dog for 5 minutes. Another one of my clients plays happy music. He's into the 80s, so he often texts me a different 80s tune that he's played in the morning, and he dances around and he moves his body. Find what works for you. What we're looking for is an actual physiological change in the feeling in your body. It's an experiential process. So we want to feel something different. When we wake up, we have our default and we want to feel more energized. We want to feel that warmth oozing out of our body, and we want to face the world from that persona each and every day. One thing I did learn from Tony Robbins, which was huge, was about the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the brain. So I had forced myself to use the logical side of my brain my whole entire life. When I decided at 5 years old to shut off my feminine side, to shut off being a girl, I shut off that right side of my brain, that's in creativity, in love, in gratitude. And when I was with Tony Robbins at one of his events, he did a process that took us right back to our earliest memory and undid the meaning of things that we gave it all the way back to then. So I came back from Date with Destiny with Tony Robbins a completely different person. I came back a girl. Wow, did that rock the socks of my husband? It changed everything in our relationship. Up until that point, I'd always carried the masculine energy and he'd always carried the feminine energy. And my kids said, Mum, why did you give Dad back his balls? As I grew into my feminine energy, that gave him the space to grow into his masculine energy. And I didn't take his balls. He showed up without them. But by me becoming feminine, I gave him the space to be able to grow into his masculine. And my daughter posted a couple of years ago on Facebook that watching my mum and dad is like watching two teenagers fall in love all over again. And that's what it was like too. We were rediscovering ourselves and rediscovering each other. And many, many relationships would not make it through such a rapid and huge transition. So what happens with all of this? How does it happen for us? Our behaviours and our practices, what we actually show out to the world, what the world all sees, is made up of all these things that I talked about underneath. So our defining moments, our beliefs, our values, our perceptions, the stories that we tell ourselves when things happen. And if we want to change what the world sees, we have to go beneath and we have to look at changing the things that sit underneath. The biggest one for me is attitudes. When I show up with an attitude of gratitude, I have a tiny little iceberg on the top that's quite gentle floating around in the water. But if I have an angry, stressed attitude, then of course my iceberg on the top is huge and bumps into everything that it comes into contact with. So this is one of the places to start. Lots of things in our life. I love this one, climate. Even if it's too hot or it's too cold, that even impacts, how we show up in the world. So the one thing I do know for sure, that Insanity by my great friend Albert Einstein, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. So when I worked all those hours in all those different businesses, I was doing the same thing over and over and over and wanting my life to be different. But it wasn't ever going to be different until I changed something. It's up to me to change something in my life. And if you want to change something in your life, it's up to you to change that something in your life. To find living a life of purpose and meaning means we have to search, we have to decide, we have to create it. Happiness is not something external that's going to arrive when we bought something or when we did something. Happiness is something that we bubble up and we regenerate from the inside out. And that creates, when we have a life of meaning and purpose, that gives us the ability to be truly happy inside. And how do we do that? We feel like we have this ceiling. So many of my clients say to me, yes, I know how to be successful, but I just get stuck at this one place. Or I know how to be loving in my relationship, but we just get to this same stuck place. And I know how to create incredible things, but I just get to this stuck place. So we all feel like that we have a ceiling in our life, and those ceilings are created by those defining moments that I talked about and all the meanings that we gave to everything in our lives. So when I retrained at the Coaching Institute, one of the exercises for our accreditation was to create a vision board. I'll tell you, it was hilarious. I came home to my husband and I said, have you ever heard the most ridiculous crock of shit in your life? A vision board. Oh my God, no chance at all. So they said, go big, create a big vision board, build your dreams. And we were building a 5-year vision board. Well, my 5-year vision board came a life vision board. I'm like, I'll go big. I didn't believe it. So it didn't matter. I could just put whatever I wanted. So I put on there a Mercedes-Benz. I put on their jet skis. I put on their world travel. I even put on there, if you can see little children playing on the beach, they're my grandchildren. And nobody in my family was even married at this time. And my daughter said to me at the time, Mum, are they your grandchildren? And I said, yes. And she said, well, get them off there. That's nothing to do with you. None of us are even ready to have. I said, chick, this is a 5-year vision board. In 5 years, I hope to be having some sort of grandchildren. Well, let me tell you about my ridiculous thing. What I did learn is if you have a lot of play and you have a lot of fun and you're curious and you're open to learn, that the whole world can transform right before your eyes. But it's up to you. So if we bring in playfulness as a child and fun as a child and go back to learning and creating a different mind than we ever had before, we can create a different life. We can go away from that insanity that Einstein talks about. And let me tell you, in under 2 years, I nailed everything on that vision board. I did not believe it was possible. I did not believe it was in any way possible. Here's my Mercedes. Here's our 2 jet skis. We travel all the time. Well, COVID not so much, but we'll be back traveling again as soon as we can. I speak at events like I am here today. The picture in the bottom is my daughter with her husband and her 2 daughters. So people think that you can't create the life that you want on your vision board and impact other people's lives. So Indiana is the first one. She was born September last year. And Peyton, the second one, she is a surprise for everybody. And she came just under a year after her sister. And my daughter came to my house and she said, "Get those kids off the vision board. I'm stopping." But the one thing that my children have taken on from this is they all have vision boards now. And in fact, Derek and I are in the middle of creating our next vision board, which is a lot harder to create now that I have a belief system in the vision board. So how does it work? We activate our reticular activating system. Our reticular activating system is that thing in our brain that tells us what to look for each and every day out in the environment. Has anybody here had the experience of buying a new car? And before they bought the new car, when the decision was made to buy the new car, they saw a car like that everywhere they went. That's what we call the reticular activating system. And that's what I did with my vision board. I opened up the reticular activating system. I brought in all these opportunities that allowed me to create the life of my dreams. And it has been so incredible. So we can't solve the problems that we create with the same thinking that we use to create them. We have to have a shift in our mindset. We need to change something that we're doing. We can't solve the problems with the same thinking. We need to do things to change our thinking. We need to bring in those positive thoughts. We need to see whatever exercises we can do. I have a big goal now. My big goal is only to be better than I was before. I don't want to compare myself with anybody else. If we compare ourselves with other people, we only ever compare the shit inside of us with the shiny outside of somebody else. And that's not the way to live our lives. So I want you to understand that you have choices and that you can take chances. And when you do that, you'll create the life that you want by creating change. I'm Mary Jensen from Empower Services, and I would love to answer any questions that you have.
That was fantastic, Mary. Thank you so much. I love that, and especially your last slide. That really speaks to me, because there are so many people who are improving themselves and always comparing themselves to other people. And really what we need to always be doing is comparing ourselves to the person we were a few seconds ago. And I think that's a really powerful message to everybody. So if anybody's got any comments they want to relay to Mary, or any questions, please pop them in the chat below, and so we can answer them. You were asked, Mary, can you go back to that last slide again, please? That was Nicole. She's just going to share screen. And if anybody else has got some questions. Maybe it was the one just before that one. Yeah. Here's a great man, the Dr. Wayne Dyer.
I actually met him.
Yeah, same. I was at his when he came to Melbourne just before he passed away. It was, I think it was 5 days before. I was at the conference that he held. It was incredible. Yeah.
I met him all the way back in 2011. When I just left Gainsborough Hardware and I was in a really, really bad funk, I went to the You Can Do It festival, and he was here for that. And then I saw him again. Yes. Okay. It must have been the same time as you.
Yeah, great man. And then we've been asked for the one that goes after that, the last slide, about the change. Sorry. Is that this one? Choices, chances, changes. There you go. We've had thanks, Mary. Very inspirational. It's all about making the choice to improve yourself.
So 2 great books that I'll leave you with is Self Matters by Phil McGraw. That's a great book to start to put yourself first, and it gives you lots of practical exercises to do in that book to help you start to make changes.
How do you spell McGraw?
Phil McGraw. That's Dr. Phil. Yep. Phil McGraw. Yep. And Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins. Because we all have this deep person inside of us who is just waiting to be unleashed.
Yeah. It's a fascinating journey that you've been on, and I think, you know, the that moment that we all have, you know, where we look back on the person that we used to be and realize, you know what, we can be better, we can do better, and we can do it in a nicer way. We don't have to just steamroll everyone. I think it's fantastic. So
my husband skips around nearly every day. He cannot believe the life that we have now and how nice I am.
And good on you for having the courage to change it, you know, taking that action and having the courage to use the information that you've gained and everything, and then being able to make this change is just an inspiration for anyone who wants to do the same thing, because I think there are a lot of people who are finding themselves coming out of this COVID cocoon and, you know, spending that time inside. They're, you know, they're finding it difficult. They saw who they were and maybe were able to question the person that they are, and being able to say, well, who do I want to be moving forward? So, you know, you're a great example of that. So thank you so much,
Tanya.
Mary, for being part of this festival.
You're welcome.
I've just got a message from Phil Kelly. Listen to Michael Jackson's song, Man in the Mirror. Change starts with you. Very true, Phil. Thank you. Well, thanks, guys, for all coming along, and a huge thank you from Mary. That was really great. We've got the amazing Zamal Chowdhury coming up at 4 o'clock, so we'll have a small break then, and we look forward to welcoming you all back for this incredible talk. And then we'd love you all to come back at 5:30. We've got the festival closing ceremony, which is all really exciting and, you know, quite emotional that it's all coming to an end. So we'll see you all soon, and thanks again, Mary.
Thanks, Tanya. Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye for now.
It is being recorded, so for those people who couldn't make it, they can watch it on a later date. So just letting you know that by staying on today, you acknowledge that that's okay. We are going to leave you all on mute at this stage, but for those of you who are technologically advanced, you'll see at the bottom of your screen there's a little icon that says reactions, and we would love for you to play with that throughout the presentation we're about to give, so we can interact with you in our own ways. Feel free to put hearts and claps or not, whatever works for you. We'd love to see your beautiful faces. Thank you so much to all of you who have already turned your videos on. We would love to see you. It's so much nicer interacting with faces rather than just with blank screens, but that's okay. I understand it's not really appropriate for everyone, so that is fine. We're just going to hand over to a little video from our sponsor, and then we will be back to start the closing ceremony.
At First State Super, we're aware our members seek to improve life, not just for themselves, but for all. Because we're aware, we help members achieve their goals in line with their values. We believe there's no need to sacrifice integrity for performance. So we invest to improve our communities, to build a more sustainable economy and support growth. By looking ahead, we strive to ensure no one is left behind. Aware Super, a new name for who we've always been.
Hi, I'm Tanya Levy, co-founder of VitaVibe Events and co-creator of the Vitality Festival. It's hard to believe that we have come to the end of the Vitality Festival. We have had 9 incredible days of health and wellness and entertainment, which have been gifted for free to frontline workers and anyone who wanted to participate all around the world.
Hi, I'm Vicky Friedman, also co-founder of VitaVibe Events and co-creator of the Vitality Festival.